I still remember the exact moment I understood that my sister's illness was not a tragedy. It was a brand. I was 23, sitting in the waiting room of a hospital where the chairs were designed to make discomfort feel like care, and I was reading an email on my phone that was not meant for me. It was from my mother to my aunt, forwarded by mistake, and it contained a sentence that I have never been able to forget. Delia thinks a kidney from Naomi would make a good local news story, but not a national one. She wants to wait for something more dramatic. I read it 3 times. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A child was crying in the next room, a high, exhausted sound that I recognized from my own childhood, from the nights when Delia's pain had been the only music in our house. And I sat there, 23 years old, healthy and invisible, and I realized that my body, my blood, my compatibility as a donor, had been evaluated not as a gift but as a marketing opportunity. And I had been found insufficiently spectacular. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you are new here, my name is Naomi, and what I am about to tell you is a story about the sister who was sick, and the sister who was healthy, and the family that decided only one of them was worth watching. If you have ever been the invisible support system for someone who performed their suffering like a one-person show, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and listen until the end. Because this story does not end with a transplant. It ends with a choice, and the choice is finally mine. Here is my story. I was born 4 minutes before my sister Delia. In the mythology of our family, those 4 minutes made me the strong one, the lucky one, the one who drew the first breath and left her sister struggling in the dark. In reality, those 4 minutes meant nothing. But our family needed a narrative, and the narrative was that I had taken something from her in the womb, that my health was a debt I owed, that every breath I took without pain was a breath I had stolen. Delia was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease at 18. I was 18 too, of course, because we were twins, because we had shared everything from a heartbeat to a birthday to the genetic lottery that had given her failing organs and me a body that worked. The diagnosis came during our senior year of high school, and it arrived like a celebrity. Suddenly, our house was full of doctors and specialists and well-meaning neighbors who brought casseroles and asked about Delia in hushed, reverent tones. Suddenly, my mother was a warrior mom, my father was a stoic dad, and Delia was the bravest girl anyone had ever met. I was the other one, the healthy twin, the one who could still go to college, still have a future, still plan for a life that did not revolve around dialysis machines and transplant lists. I was supposed to be grateful. I was supposed to be supportive. I was supposed to disappear into the background of Delia's story and emerge only when my presence was useful. And I was useful. I was tested within a month of her diagnosis. Blood type, tissue match, cross-compatibility. I remember the nurse looking at the results and saying, "You are a perfect match. Almost identical, like you were designed for this." I remember feeling a warmth that I mistook for purpose. I was designed for this. I was the spare parts. I was the backup plan. I was the sister whose body existed to keep the other sister alive. But the transplant never happened. My parents called a family meeting, which meant a meeting without me, and they decided that I was too young, too fragile, too important to my studies to undergo major surgery. They told me this afterward over dinner while Delia smiled with her pale, perfect face and said she would wait for a deceased donor. It was more ethical, she said. It gave someone else's death meaning. It was the right thing to do. I believed her. I believed all of them. I lived with the guilt of my health, the shame of my intact body, the constant, grinding sense that I had failed my sister by being born whole. I finished college. I went to medical school. I became a doctor, a nephrologist, specializing in the exact disease that was killing my twin. I told myself I was doing it for her. I told myself I was making myself useful in the only way that mattered. I told myself that my life, my career, my every waking moment was an apology for the 4 minutes that had made me the lucky one. Delia, meanwhile, built an empire. She started a blog during her first year of dialysis. Kidney Warrior, she called it. She posted photos of herself in hospital gowns, looking beautiful and brave, her makeup perfect even when the tubes were visible. She wrote about her journey, her faith, her refusal to let illness define her. She was interviewed by local news, then national magazines, then morning shows. She wrote a memoir at 25, The Waiting Room, which became a bestseller. She started a foundation, the Delia Foundation, which raised millions for kidney research and awareness. She never mentioned me, not in the blog, not in the book, not in the interviews. I was edited out of her narrative the way a director cuts a scene that does not serve the story. When she was asked about family, she talked about our parents, their sacrifice, their strength. When she was asked about support systems, she talked about her nurses, her doctors, her online community. When she was asked if she had siblings, she said, "I have a twin, but we are very different people. She is healthy. She does not understand. I did not understand." That was the truth she had constructed, and I lived inside it for years. I did not understand what it was like to be sick. I did not understand what it was like to wait for death. I did not understand why my perfect match, my identical tissue, my kidney that had been designed for her, had been rejected in favor of a stranger's organ that her body might reject. I understood finally at 33. I was cleaning out my mother's house after my father's death, a task that involved sorting through decades of accumulated guilt and memorabilia, when I found the box. It was in the attic, behind a stack of Delia's old magazine covers, labeled Family Correspondence 2008 to 2010. Inside were printed emails, hundreds of them, my mother's meticulous record of every decision, every conversation, every lie. I read them in chronological order. The first few were about me. Tests, results, the excitement of the perfect match. And then an email from Delia to my mother, dated 3 weeks after the diagnosis. "Mom, I have been thinking about the transplant. If Naomi gives me her kidney, it is a good story. Local news, maybe. Twin saves twin, but it is not enough. It is not the kind of story that builds a foundation. It is not the kind of story that gets you on Opera. I think we should wait. I think we should say she is not a match or that the doctors advise against it or something. I think we need something bigger." My mother's response, "I will talk to your father. We want what is best for your platform, not your health, not your life. Your platform." I kept reading. The emails became a conspiracy. The plan to reject my kidney, to manufacture a narrative of ethical waiting, to position Delia as a saint who refused to endanger her sister even for her own survival. The crowdfunding campaign that raised $300,000 for the Delia Foundation while she was still on the waiting list. The documentary deal, signed 6 months after the diagnosis, that required exclusive access to her transplant journey. The clause in the contract that specified the donor must be anonymous, must be a stranger, must be a story of community generosity rather than family sacrifice. And then the emails about me. My mother writing to my aunt, "Naomi is taking it hard, she thinks she has failed. I think that is good. It keeps her focused on Delia, it keeps her useful." Delia writing to my mother, "She is so guilty. It is perfect. She will do anything I need. She is already talking about becoming a doctor. We will have our own specialist on call." I sat in that attic for hours, the dust settling on my shoulders like ash, and I read every email. I read about the documentary premiere, where Delia wore a gown the color of dialysis fluid and accepted an award for bravery. I read about the foundation gala, where she raised $2 million in a single night. I read about the waiting list, the false hopes, the near misses that were staged for the cameras. And I read finally about the transplant. It came at 28. A deceased donor, a young man killed in a car accident, his family generous enough to allow their tragedy to become Delia's content. The surgery was filmed. The recovery was documented. The moment she woke up, weak and beautiful, was broadcast live to her followers. She called it her rebirth. She called it proof that miracles happen. She called it the culmination of her journey. She never mentioned the immunosuppressants. Not in the documentary, not in the book, not in the interviews, but the emails mentioned them. My mother worried, Delia dismissive. "The side effects are making me gain weight. The side effects are making my hair thin. The side effects are making me look sick, and I cannot look sick anymore. I am a survivor now. I am a brand." And then, the email that broke something in me that had been holding since I was 23. Delia to my mother, 2 years after the transplant. I stopped taking them, just for a few weeks. I needed to lose the weight for the cover of Health magazine. I will start again after the shoot. She had sabotaged her own health. She had rejected a kidney that could have saved her, waited for a stranger's organ that made a better story, and then she had thrown that gift away because the medication made her look less than perfect. She had chosen her image over her life. And she had done it knowing that when the kidney failed, when the crisis came, she could blame the system, blame the doctors, blame the cruelty of fate. She could make a sequel. I found the proof in the next email. Delia planning. The second documentary, The Waiting Room Part 2, When Miracles Fade. The foundation campaign, Double or Nothing. Raising money for a second transplant. The book deal already signed for a memoir about resilience in the face of recurring illness. She had engineered her own relapse, and she had done it with the same precision she applied to her makeup. She had made herself sick again because being a survivor was not enough. Being a twice survivor was the real brand. And now, at 35, she needed a second kidney. The waiting list was longer. Her health was worse. The documentary cameras were rolling. And my family, my mother, my aunts, everyone who had participated in the lie, turned to me with the same expectant faces they had worn 15 years earlier. "It is your turn," my mother said. "She is your sister. You are a perfect match. You owe her this." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had written, in an email I had found, that my guilt was perfect because it kept me useful. I looked at the woman who had chosen one daughter's platform over the other daughter's body. I looked at the woman who had never, in 36 years, asked me what I wanted. I said yes. Not because I was surrendering, not because I was still the guilty twin, the healthy twin, the one who owed her life to the other. I said yes because I had a plan. Because I had spent 15 years being invisible, and I was finally ready to be seen. Because I understood, in a way that Delia never had, that the most devastating revenge is not withholding what someone needs. It is giving them exactly what they asked for, in a form they never anticipated. I underwent the evaluation. I let them film it for the documentary, the cameras capturing my brave face as I submitted to blood tests and psychological screenings. I let them interview me, my first appearance in Delia's narrative, cast as the redeemed sister, the one who had finally stepped up. I let my mother cry on camera, talking about the bond between twins, the sacrifice, the love that transcends everything. And I collected evidence. I found the original compatibility report from 15 years ago, the one that proved I had always been a perfect match. I found the emails, printed and stored in the same attic box, the conspiracy that had kept me from saving my sister when saving her would have been inconvenient. I found Delia's medical records, the ones that showed she had stopped taking her medication, the ones that proved her relapse was self-inflicted. I found the documentary contract, the foundation bylaws, the financial records that showed the Delia Foundation had paid for her apartment, her car, her wardrobe, while spending less than 10% of its revenue on actual research. I compiled it all. I made copies. I stored them in safety deposit boxes and cloud drives and the offices of lawyers who did not know my name. And I waited. The family meeting was scheduled for the documentary's climax. A live event, broadcast to Delia's 2 million followers, where the family would gather to support her as she received the news about her second transplant. The producers had built a set in our childhood home, the living room transformed into a medical drama backdrop, the cameras hidden in the houseplints, the lighting designed to make everyone look like they were in a hospital even though we were sitting on my mother's floral sofa. I arrived last. I wore black, not the beige of the supportive sister, not the white of the innocent victim, but black, the color of endings. Delia was on the couch, looking frail and beautiful, her makeup expertly applied to suggest illness without actually showing it. My mother was beside her, holding her hand. Cameras were rolling. The audience was watching. The narrative was about to reach its peak. The doctor, a man who had been paid by the foundation to appear on camera, delivered the news. A donor had been found. The transplant could proceed. Delia cried, perfect tears, and my mother cried, and the cameras captured the moment of hope, the moment of family unity, the moment of love conquering all. And then I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not rush to the center of the room. I simply walked to the television that had been set up for the broadcast, picked up the remote, and pressed play. The first image was an email. Delia's words from 15 years ago, the plan to reject my kidney, the calculation of narrative value, the decision that my body, my match, my offer of life was insufficiently spectacular. The room went silent. Delia's tears stopped. My mother's hand went limp. I pressed the next button. The medical records, the proof that Delia had stopped taking her immunosuppressants. The dates correlated with magazine covers and foundation galas. The self-inflicted relapse engineered for content. I pressed the next button. The financial records, the foundation's spending, the apartment, the car, the wardrobe, the 10% that went to research, the 90% that went to Delia's brand, and finally I pressed the last button. The video I had recorded myself 3 days earlier, in a hospital room with a single camera. I was sitting on a bed, wearing a hospital gown, looking into the lens with the same expression I had practiced in mirrors for 15 years. "My name is Naomi," I said on the screen. I am Delia's twin. I am a perfect match, and I am donating my kidney today. Not to my sister, to a stranger, anonymously, because my body is not a plot device. It is not a marketing opportunity. It is not a gift that can be rejected because it is not dramatic enough and then demanded when it is convenient. My body is mine, and for the first time in 36 years, I am choosing what it does. The video showed me signing the forms. It showed me being wheeled into surgery. It showed me afterward in recovery, smiling for the first time in a photograph that was not staged by someone else. The live feed cut out. The cameras stopped rolling. Delia was screaming, not the practiced scream of a woman in pain, but the raw, ugly scream of a woman who had been denied the spotlight. My mother was crying, real tears, the tears of a woman who had finally understood that her narrative had collapsed. And I stood in the center of the room in my black dress, and I felt something I had never felt before. Not victory, not joy, not even anger, just space. The space where guilt used to live. The space where shame had made its home. The space where I had kept my invisibility, my usefulness, my constant, grinding apology for being healthy. I walked out of the house. I did not look back. I got in my car and I drove to the hospital where I had donated my kidney, where a stranger was recovering with an organ that had never been a brand, never been content, never been anything but a piece of me that I chose to give away. The stranger's name was Maria. She was a teacher, 52 years old, with 2 children and a mortgage and no platform. She wrote me a letter through the anonymous donor program. She said thank you. She said she had been on the waiting list for 4 years. She said she wanted to meet me someday if I was willing. I wrote back. I said yes. We met for coffee, not in a hospital, not on camera, just in a coffee shop where the chairs were uncomfortable and the light was bad and no one was watching. She told me about her students. She told me about her garden. She told me about the moment she woke up from surgery and felt, for the first time in years, like her body was hers again. I understood. I told her about my sister. I told her about the emails. I told her about the 15 years I had spent believing that my health was a debt, that my body was a resource, that my life was only meaningful in relation to someone else's suffering. And I told her about the moment I chose, the moment I said no to the narrative and yes to myself. Maria listened. She did not film it, she did not tweet about it. She just held my hand and she said, "Your body is yours. It always was. They just made you forget." I did not forget anymore. I moved to a different city. I changed my name, not to hide but to choose. I continued practicing medicine, but I specialized in donor ethics, in the rights of living donors, in the invisible people who are asked to give pieces of themselves and then are expected to disappear. I wrote a book, not a memoir but a study, The Gift and the Brand. It did not become a bestseller. It was not optioned for a documentary. But it was read by medical students, by ethicists, by people who understood that the body is not content. Delia's second documentary was never released. The foundation collapsed. The brand dissolved. She received a kidney eventually, from another deceased donor, but the narrative had shifted. The comments on her social media were no longer about bravery. They were about manipulation, about performance, about the woman who had chosen her image over her life and had tried to demand her sister's body as compensation. I do not know if she is happy. I do not know if she is healthy. I do not think about her often, and when I do, I feel something that is not quite forgiveness, but is close to indifference. She is a person who made choices. I am a person who made different ones, and the space between us is no longer filled with my guilt. I am 36 years old. I have 1 kidney given freely to a stranger. I have a career that matters to me. I have a small apartment with a garden where I grow tomatoes because they need care and attention and they do not perform. They just exist. They just are. And I have my body. Finally, completely, without apology, mine. I am Naomi. I am 36 years old. And this is not the end of my story. It is the first day I woke up without owing anyone my health. See you in the next story.